Hi everyone, and welcome back to Advancing with Watercolor. I'm Gary Tucker. We are in Paris, and specifically in the Latin Quarter, where we find an abundance of street musicians. This can be a wonderful subject for study, and we're going to use this small band that we found on Buci Street as our main subject for today's exercise. We're starting off by looking at where they like to situate themselves, usually under a canopy or an awning, a crowd that forms, and then we'll get into some of the study of figures and their relationship to their instruments. So let's pick up our brushes and walk over to the watercolor table to get started. The drill for working with musicians, painting musicians. Okay, everybody, I want to show you some of the things that I do in creating figures that are doing something specific. Today's painting is about musicians on Buci Street in Paris. And they're almost a nightly occurrence. There's a lot of musicians in the area, and in particular, I enjoyed the New Orleans style jazz that these guys were playing. Pretty simple group, 4 musicians, bassist, clarinetist, a trombone, and a banjo player. They had a dancer that seems to follow them everywhere. In any case, our challenge is to kind of paint them in a simple manner. You see me starting just to focus on the bass player, which is very hard to pick up in the photo. There's other resources that are available on the net where you can get more pictures of bass players. This bass player, we're looking at him from the side, and it's particularly a good pose for creating a grouping. In this case, we're just painting the bass player, and I'm conscious of the height of the bass, the sections of the bass, there's a top and a bottom to the bass, and the player's relationship. He's wrapping his front arm around the front of the bass and holding it on his shoulder. So that little bit of an A shape or V shape is, I think, really important to convey this player. I'm using the single color of sepia to create the figures and a small brush that has a good point. This helps me to get some precision to create the bulk of the body with one stroke as well as the smaller parts of the body. It holds a good amount of paint. You can see I haven't even had to refill my brush yet on this character. I've painted it straight through. Here the clarinetist has both hands on the clarinet, standing up and bending forward a little bit. So compared to the bass player, a much simpler pose. We're painting him this way, sort of isolated from each other, just to get a feel for how the pose is created. Later on, we're going to create a grouping. Now comes kind of the main figure, in my opinion, because he's got such a strong gestural pose. This is the trombone player. It's a very long instrument with some moving parts, and I want to get an arch to the back. So you saw that was kind of the first thing that I created, was a little bit of an arch that's created by the torso and created by the legs coming off in an opposite direction. And then place the head and the arms extending from the body. So it really feels like he's into the music. You know, when they have a posture like this, you can almost hear the music coming out, and that's what I want the result to be in this particular pose. I've created the bell near one hand and the slide moving upward at an angle. And these are things that I think I'm going to use in the final painting. The last figure is the banjo player, which is, in the photograph, we get a pretty good view of the banjo player. He's kind of facing us directly. We can see the hand moving in front of the instrument. We notice the round shape of the banjo, which is really important to capture in the finished pose. So I've got the creating the shoulders, the arms. I added the head a little early, but no problem. And we're just going to drop the legs basically straight down. So the real animated figure is the trombone player. The other players are definitely related to their instrument, but not with the same flair yet as with the trombone player. So let's create now a grouping of these players. Grouping the players, we're going to use a strategy that we practiced in making figures back in our second week when we were painting the farmers market in Sarlat. The strategy being that we can use a group and an isolated figure to create a little tension and a little focus on the main figure, or a main figure being the banjo. So I'm basically repeating the pose here of the bass player coming out a little more easily, a little more quickly this time, because I've already sort of internalized the pose and I have it in my mind's eye. And when that happens, when I can start to see it on the paper before I actually paint it, I feel free to be a little bit more expressive with the brushwork. I think you noticed that, and whether it comes out better or not is another question, but I definitely enjoy it more and feel I have it, and I can bring it out and place it in a manner that looks good. So at this point, I'm just worried about the silhouette. I'm not trying to place one arm in front, one arm behind. I'm just joining everything. I am conscious of the proportion and the proportion in the instrument as well. The division in the lower part of the bass is, I think, a really good visual indicator. The hand coming above, just we see the knuckles now. The neck and the top of the bass also important. So now I want to join these figures a little bit. So I'm going to be moving from left to right. And I'm starting to place the clarinetist in the same manner, starting with the torso, thinking about the height, how the instrument comes off of the body, and adding arms, and then lastly the head. And he meets the bass right on the lower section of the bass, so the leg and the bass are roughly connected. I want to be able to see enough of the player or the instrument to get an impression, but I also want them to be joined, at least these three: the trombone player, the clarinet player, and the bass player. The next one is a little tricky because we overlap the clarinet itself. It's not something we would do naturally, but I feel we can bring it out when we start to place a darker value into the figures. So I'm going right on top with my trombone player, trying to get the arch of the back and that kind of wide stance. And then once I have the body in place, I add the arms, the head, and last I kind of extend the trombone itself off of the shoulders and the head so that it all feels connected. And this is I feel it's a more, strong pose, rather than showing them spaced out evenly. which we often see in photographs, is they're kind of spaced out and they look arranged almost. This looks more like a natural grouping, like something you'd see on the street. Something we see in the photograph, they're kind of overlapping each other. Our challenge is going to be to bring the clarinet player forward in all of this and have the trombone recede, but we can do that with darks and lights as the silhouettes dry. Some interesting angles are coming out of the group pose. The rise of the neck of the bass, the rise of the slide of the trombone creates a nice dynamic energy and a lively energy, something that to me speaks about the music itself, really upbeat and energetic. The bodies too convey that sort of feeling. So the musician's body is unique. The way that they relate to their instrument, the way that they move when they're playing, they're always moving. That's part of creating a relaxed feeling for the musician, so that they avoid tension, is to kind of keep moving and keep and they also keep time. They're tapping their foot, they're swaying their body. So I'm conscious of that, and I'm trying to bring that out in today's painting. And then we place this solitary figure of the banjo player, kind of leading the way, and this creates a little bit of interesting tension. A grouping of three, isolating one, there's a nice tension there, much more interesting than the grouping above, where we have them spaced out and looking rather static. This is much more natural, much more energetic, and a little bit, for us, it's more difficult, especially where they overlap, but we're going to try and conjure up some ways to deal with that. One of the ways that we can deal with that is to add clothing or add a darker element, in this case just a stronger sepia color. And for example, if we want the bass player to come in front of his instrument, let's put that arm as though he's wearing a darker jacket, coming over the instrument and pushing back the instrument just a little bit. So these darks can give us that sort of division that we need in creating the figure and then the instrument, or by stacking figures. So just by putting this little bit of pigment on the jacket and arm, there's a little bit more of a three-dimensional quality to the subject. We'll do that a little bit in the bass, and try to apply this principle, through the other figures as well. At this point, from my point of view, I can start to see it in these silhouettes. I can start to see the map of where I want to go in terms of lights and darks. I'm working in the trombone figure now I'm thinking about putting a vest on the trombonist, so I can really set off the arm. Imagine a black vest and a white shirt. That combination, even though it's not in our photograph, will help me to show the gesture or the relationship of the arm and the trombonist to the trombone itself. So I'm going to take advantage of that and try to create the feeling that he's got a vest on. Clarinet player is a little more difficult. How to get that instrument to come out, and how to get the feeling that the clarinet player is closer to us, a little bit in front of the trombone player, a little in front of the bass player. So we'll probably put his legs a little lower. So here we go with a little different combination. Lighter jacket, darker pants. This is going to set off the clarinet player, separate them from the other figures. If we, leave it in this state, it's okay. We can add a highlight to the clarinet and bring it out a little later. And in truth, it's not too far off if they look like, they're joined or look like they're brothers. Nice flow to the darks, and I like the decision we've made to kind of group these figures. I think this is going to be a good foundation for our painting. And now we start with the banjo player. I'm going to put a jacket and bring the shoulders up a little bit so it feels like he's or she's looking down. Leaving a few highlights for the round shape of the banjo. That's one important highlight, a feeling of the face, the opening of the jacket. We can accomplish a lot with just a little touch here and there. And this really brings, compared to the silhouetted versions above, this really brings out the qualities, more three-dimensional quality in the grouping, and we recognize the posture a little better, feels more natural. I can almost hear the music. Just letting that go slightly in front of the trombone player. The clarinet is going to help to create the feeling of that instrument. So this is one area I'll have to resolve. I feel this is going to be a challenging area in the painting. It's good to be aware of that, when you're creating something from scratch as we are. We have to be inventive, and we also have to know where trouble lies. So I can feel, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge to create the grouping in a natural way. But this is a great way to start with the tonal value study of the solitary figures, of the grouped figures, and get a feeling for the poses and the relationships of the characters. Basically, all the same height, making the instruments read, and a bit of clothing has been our goal in this piece. Point out a few things, starting with silhouettes, kind of based on the image we have. Bass player, clarinet player, trombone player. Trombone, I wanted to exaggerate and actually aim his instrument up in the air as though he's really driving a melody home. Banjo player, and here I'm adding some same silhouettes, but I'm thinking about how to group them. I want to group them so they're together, especially through here, separate the banjo player a little bit and create more interest that way. If they're equally separated, they don't look so good. So there's some conflict here where they intersect, and I'm using darks to kind of help separate them. I can add a couple highlights once this is dry to bring the clarinet player forward a little bit. I can also bring him a little lower in the picture to help that, right? But I got the gestures that I'm looking for, I got the grouping that I'm looking for, and now I'm gonna do a tonal study, putting them in sort of a daytime setting under the canopy, And then we'll try a nighttime setting as well. So we're starting with the figures again. Remember our proportions, and remember the process, a good process, to start with that torso, let it define the gesture and the turn of the body, and looking for some movements in our figures that suggest they're really playing their instrument, how the musician interacts with their instrument. They hold it against them, they blow into it or blow down into it, they strum it or pick it. So they need to have it close to the body. It's kind of an extension of the body. And if we can read the silhouette, we can understand what's going on in this scene. If we can understand the silhouette, then we're doing good. So that's going to be our strategy today, is to make the most of our silhouettes and then have some fun with color.